I am Chris Goff. I'm an industrial designer and I currently work as a lead designer for UAP, Urban Art Projects, in their Melbourne office. So I initially started studying graphic design straight out of high school, but didn't really love it, or it didn't really feel right, and I took some time off, played music, did a lot of other things with my life, and then eventually came back around to furniture making, and then studied furniture design at RMIT. So I did an associate degree, and then I from there went into a bachelor degree of industrial design at RMIT University. I guess when the furniture design degree I did, which was a 2-year associate degree, one of the projects that I designed within that was a chair that I then licensed to a Melbourne furniture studio called Yellow Diva. So when I completed that furniture design degree and started studying industrial design, I also started working for them as a CAD designer. And I guess just an all-round sort of prototyping design position, but as a kind of a junior mid-weight sort of designer. And when I finished studying my bachelor in industrial design, I was making furniture as well. So I did a lot of bespoke kind of commissions for people, you know, desks for people's offices and all sorts of different things, which I really enjoyed, but it didn't really feel like a viable career unless I really kind of built my own brand and invested a lot of time into it. And then at the same time, somebody offered me a job working as just an industrial designer for a large scale built form specialist workshop in Footscray called Big Fish. So I started working there, and most of our projects were based around public art, sculptures, street furniture, that kind of stuff, and lots of playgrounds, lots of working with landscape architects on specialist playgrounds and special installations. And that really was kind of the moment that I realized that's what I wanted to be doing, that large scale kind of work within the public realm that was permanent or temporary kind of installation. Objects and things that really, I guess, tell a story, and you know, sometimes they're educational, a lot of the time they're just there to kind of beautify the city or wherever you are. So that then led me to, I guess, develop skills and a real interest in specialist kind of design in playgrounds and sculpture and public art. One of the projects I'll always remember was we did an installation for Vivid Festival in Sydney in 2018, I think, and it was an all abilities play installation in Darling Harbour as part of Vivid. So it was for children on the autism spectrum to be able to go to this festival of lights and everything that's normally really challenging for kids on the autism spectrum. We designed and installed a kind of an under the sea themed, Beneath the Sea it was called, sorry, Beneath the Sea experience for children in wheelchairs or with autism, so that they could get a sense of what it's like to swim in Sydney Harbour and what's down on the ocean floor. And that was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, and I think that really kind of cemented in my mind that that was the realm that I wanted to be working within. So in 2018, I moved to London, to the UK, basically just because I'd always wanted to go and live in London specifically, but somewhere else, and I felt like there was so much opportunity in a city that size to find kind of work that I really wanted to do and get some more experience outside of the scale of things that were kind of felt like they were available in Melbourne. So it took a little while when I moved over there to find a job. The first thing I actually did was acting, background acting in movies as like an extra. So I was in Star Wars and a few other things while I was there. But then I eventually found a job working for a company called James Clancy Design, who do London's Christmas decorations. So all of the really like huge there are these angels that they put up down Regent Street in London every year, and precincts like Carnaby Street and Mercer's Yard, which are these kind of really old neighbourhoods in central London with a lot of shops and retail in them, and they all kind of commission these incredible Christmas installations every year. So I worked on Carnaby Street and a few other projects as the lead technical designer, they called me. But it was basically working with the creative director of the company to come up with these concepts that there would often be like a charity involved with the client, and they'd sort of have something that they wanted this Christmas thing to be about. So, 2019 I think was the first Christmas I did, and we did a sort of a ocean conservation themed Christmas scheme in Carnaby Street. So it was a collaboration with a charity called Project Zero, who are all about kind of ocean conservation and keeping plastic out of the ocean. So this kind of, all these sea creatures and things are all made out of recycled plastics, and it was pretty wild. I also just worked on a lot of other projects for like the city of Liverpool, the city of Leeds. We did some work in Portugal and a few other places in Europe as well. But the main kind of focus of the company was this like temporary, almost like theatre set design, but within the public realm. So it was it really appealed to me in the same way that my earlier work had, in that we were essentially telling stories and placing these objects into the public realm for people to experience and interact with. So I did that for basically about 2.5, nearly 3 years. And I moved back to Melbourne in 2021. So most of the way through the COVID pandemic, I came back here. And since then, I've been working at Urban Art Projects, UAP, which is my current role. UAP is basically a company that was formed probably, I think, about 30 years ago, specifically to fabricate art and sculptures, and grew into a really like big force, I guess, in public art in Australia, and then has now since expanded into, we have offices and workshops in New York and China as well, and we do a lot of work in the Middle East. So it's really grown to be an international company, but it started in Brisbane. So there's a foundry in Brisbane where we cast a lot of statues and a lot of all sorts of, artwork kind of stuff. We have a robotics laboratory, so we have a number of kind of robotic manufacturing machines that we use in everyday production, but then there's also an advanced manufacturing laboratory, which is a collaboration with Queensland Uni. So they're basically doing research into what they can do with robotic technology to make things. So there's a lot of sort of traditional sculpture work happening within the company, but then we're also doing much more avant-garde kind of architectural works, pushing boundaries. So my role at UAP is to lead projects, and I'm basically the lead designer. So I work generally with one or sometimes multiple artists for a particular project. They come in with sort of an idea about what they want this artwork to be about, what they want the story to be. A lot of the time I'm working with Indigenous artists, so they bring in kind of stories that have been passed to them from the elders of the clan, the people, and they often want to tell dreaming stories or legends, or these sort of ways that they share connection with the country, and then also their ancestors, and also things like Indigenous astronomy, like the way they read the stars to tell the season. Generally, when I'm working with artists, a lot of the time they're used to making sort of small-scale gallery projects, and a lot of the time I'm working with Indigenous artists, and they're practice is, you know, often about painting, often it's just storytelling, and kind of preserving and relaying stories to younger generations. So my role is then to kind of work through that, understand what that story is that they're wanting to tell, and then translate that into a deliverable built design outcome. So it's interesting because like I don't necessarily have to come up with the ideas all the time, which I quite like, because I feel like that's the most exhausting thing about being a designer. Whereas I've got people coming in who have the ideas and have this sort of story in their mind, but they have no idea what to do with that or how to realize it or how to build something that tells that story. So it's really about sort of creative problem solving, you know, trying to get out of them and kind of build a relationship with the artist, find out what it is that they want to talk about through this artwork, and then kind of unpacking that and putting together a design proposal that I can hand back to them and then to whoever the client is that's commissioned the work. So yeah, a lot of the time we're working for developers that are building, you know, skyscrapers, and in most parts of Australia, within that permit for them to build that skyscraper, they have to commission public artworks. So a lot of our work is that kind of like new kind of developments where they legally have to deliver public facing artwork. So we've got this kind of constant flow of work within the public realm, and there's this big push to really tell Indigenous stories and stories of place and stories of like the cultures that were there before colonization. So that's really interesting because I'm constantly learning from, you know, all of these artists that I'm working with, and then also constantly developing new ways to visualize whatever we're talking about, and figuring out, you know, as a designer, you often find tools that you use and you do things the same way over and over again. Whereas my role, every single thing I do is a completely new challenge from day one. It's always a completely different scenario, a completely different artist. So it's like, there's not so much like a lot of industrial design and a lot of product design is kind of iterations on things for slightly different markets or whatever. Whereas what I'm doing is much more almost like what an architect would do, where every single time it's a completely new scenario that you're trying to solve, you know, trying to understand what this place is and what that means, and what this artwork is that you're trying to put into it, and how to do that. So how to actually work out what it is and what it's made out of, and how big it is, and how to visualize it, and how to then kind of tell that story back to the client in a way that convinces them that it's, you know, it's what they want to commission to put there.
So when you design, like say you put a design proposal and you do your research, is that the same design cycle most product designer or industrial designer? Because that is like, say in Victoria curriculum, for example, they have like design brief and research and idea generation, idea refinement, idea testing. Are you following the same thing? Because that sounds a bit different to what, say for example, product designer will do, where they follow that certain steps. But what you doing, because you sound like more like you collaborate and you facilitate that, like the relationship between like artist and that developer and yourself, a lot of different people, a lot of different like stakeholder. So that sounds quite different from the traditional understanding of what a designer does. What an industrial designer does.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of project management in what I do, and people management. But it's also it's a little bit different to a product designer or someone that is making something to be like mass manufactured, because you don't have to refine it to the same degree, because you're not making it over and over again, and that, you know, that 1 or 2 cents extra profit that you can engineer into it in a product is valid, but in a one-off built form that you're placing into the public realm, it's kind of usually more important to make sure that it's, robust. There's a lot more kind of thinking about how are people going to interact with it? What happens when someone climbs on it, or like crashes into it, or kicks it, or the sea, if it's near the sea, the kind of salt in the air will make it kind of tarnish. There's a lot more working out those kind of parameters and working within that. But the design process that you apply to it, I guess, is still essentially the same. You go through that same thing of, often I work on writing the brief before it gets given to anyone. And then I'll interpret that brief and work with someone to come up with the initial idea and, spitball, brainstorm, and then refine that down and kind of try and figure out ways of making it and eliminate possibilities based on, X, Y, Z. Does it fit into these categories? Is it going to perform and do this? It's that same sort of process, but it's a bit different because you're just building one of these things and you're just doing it once. And then once I hand that over for someone to actually deliver it, I move on to the next thing.
If you had to list like the top 5 most important skills to this current role as design lead, what would they be?
I mean, probably the most important skill is asking questions, but the curiosity of being able to extract out of people what it is that they want this thing to be, and understand that and kind of unpack it and understand it in a way that you can tick boxes and hand the kind of idea back to them in an achievable way. Visualization is really important too. I do a lot of sketching because we're kind of talking about ideas, and I'm like, the ability to be able to sketch it quickly as you're doing that is really important. I quite often am on Zoom with artists, and I join the Zoom on my iPad and just sketch in real time so that they can see what I'm seeing in my brain, and we kind of have a really quick visual conversation through that. We use a lot of 3D modeling as well. So I've got a team of 3D artists that I work with. We do lots of like VR with the headset, because a lot of what we do is so organic, and often it's not like parts that bolt together and fit together. They're quite often really organic kind of artworks. So we do a lot of VR modeling in Gravity Sketch and various other things to kind of get the forms modeled up. But then use a lot of kind of rendering software to produce visualizations that we can then show the client the artwork, the project, whatever it is, in situ on their site. A lot of kind of like technical drawing as well, which kind of comes from those models, but being able to then translate that into a set of build drawings so that it can actually be fabricated. I mean, they're sort of probably the important sort of skills that I use every day, and just communicating and being able to understand. It's so important to be able to ask the right questions, and it's exactly the same whether you're actually dealing with a person or whether you're just trying to find out information. Knowing, I think that probably the most important thing you learn when you study design and through experience of being a designer is you don't have to know how to do everything, but you have to know how to find out everything. So it's about the way that you approach problems or questions, what questions you ask, how you go looking for, what you think might be the answer, whether you're trying to get that information out of people, or whether you're trying to get that information from the internet or from manufacturers or materials. The most important thing, I think, is to be able to understand how to go about solving that, what questions to ask, where to look, that ability to understand how to figure things out, that's the thing that you have to have. My advice for design students or young people that want to become design students would be, I guess, to just really be really open to different ways of working and understand that you're going to be learning the whole time and you'll never actually know everything. And realizing that, I mean, I feel like that's probably just a life lesson anyway, but just always be open to the fact that you're learning every single day, and every single time you undertake a design project, do it like understanding that you're getting something out of it too. I met a lot of people when I was studying and like in my earlier careers, I guess, who have kind of gone off to do different things now and haven't really stuck with design, which is, you know, I guess when you're trained as a designer, that skill set can take you in all sorts of different directions. You know, I'm not doing really what I thought I would be doing at the beginning. So, you know, don't be afraid to kind of veer off the course that you thought your career was going to take. You know, we all thought, I started studying furniture design and we all thought we were going to be furniture designers and have our own studio. And I sort of did that for a while and tried to do it, but it never really kind of felt like it was, you know, if it doesn't happen, that's okay, because there are so many different careers that you don't even really know exist that you can go into as a designer. You know, like I work in sort of public art, almost architectural scale design, but my skill set as a furniture designer and an industrial designer means that the way that I do my job is completely different to anybody else who's worked in this role before. And I think my company that I work for, UAP, sees the value in, you know, I learnt first how to make things and then kind of built my design skills from there. So understanding, you know, for what I do, because we're actually fabricating and installing these things, my understanding of the materials that we're making them out of and the processes that people are actually going to be, you know, performing to fabricate these things, that's really why I guess I'm good at what I'm doing. If you can find what you're really good at as a young person and then pursue it, and then even when you're working like a lot of hours of overtime and a lot of, you know, late nights at university and a lot of kind of weekends trying to install your own kind of projects or all of those sorts of things, you know, you really have to love what you're doing to do it and to keep doing it, because it's not going to just work out the first time. I mean, it's hard because you can't necessarily formulate a course that's perfect for everybody. I think it's really important to have enough teachers who have enough time to listen to the students and you know, understand what they like and what they're good at, you know, because everybody sort of has particular things that they're really, really good at, and, you know, kind of encouraging them to go in that direction is obviously really important. Thank you for listening to my design story. Don't forget to subscribe to 100 Designers Say. And if you want to see more of my work or find out more about what I've done and what I'm doing, go to my website at www.ckgoff.com. And good luck on your design journey.